June 3 of the Colfax City Council to order. We are going to go ahead and get started with our call to open session and roll call. Oh, shoot. Sorry, 1 second here. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the changing of the agenda order just for transparency here. So we're going to go ahead and change the agenda order to have the closed session at the end of the meeting since everybody's already here and seated. We got started late. We want to respect the public's time. So we will hold the closed session at the end of the meeting today to make things a little more convenient for you guys. So if anyone's opposed to that, please feel free to say something now. Come on up to the mic.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
This is Colfax. I am representing the Colfax Garden Club. I am the chair of the Downtown Unification Committee. And can you all hear me? Okay. It's and I'm here to tell you that we recently received two really big.
Oh, I apologize, Ingrid. Specifically, I'm asking for public comment just on our change to the agenda order to move closed session. So it's totally fine. I just want to make sure we get your comments appropriately captured at the right part of the agenda. Thank you. Does anybody have any opposition to the change in the agenda order this evening? All right, seeing none, back to council. Can I get approval to make that adjustment to the agenda order?
Move to approve. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, with that, we will go ahead and go directly into a roll call.
Councilmember Lemon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Douglas.
Present.
And Mayor Burse.
Here, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all for bearing with me through that. So with that, we will go ahead and move directly into the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered routine and non-controversial in nature and will be moved on in one blanket motion. Anybody may pull an item from consent for discussion. Would anybody on council or from the public like to pull an item from consent? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and go straight to agency reports, starting with Placer County Sheriff's Office.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Sergeant Kevin Griffiths with the Placer County Sheriff's Office, also the station commander here in Colfax. Marguerite, I think we have a video we were going to play. % of normal as of yesterday. The record-setting winter we had has set the stage for an extremely dangerous river season. And unfortunately, we have already seen the results of this.
First, I would like the families and friends of those lost in these rivers to know that our thoughts and prayers are with you. Since 1983, 54 people have drowned in Auburn State Park.
Accidents can happen. It could be a simple trip or stumble for you to end up in one of our waterways. If the public does not listen to our warnings this year, the death toll will only continue to go up.
The Be Riverwise campaign was designed to inform the public of the dangers of the river and staying out of the river at this time. We've had one confirmed fatality and one still missing going into the river. We will continue our campaign throughout the summer to inform the public of their river's dynamics and when it's safe to go into the river to have a good time during the summer. I can't stress enough the traditional recreation spots and swimming pools in this river are different this year. The flow is deceptive. The current is much stronger as it appears. Most of the people that we attempt to rescue, once they get into the water, they're pulled to the center line and pushed downstream.
We've been working to make people aware of the dangers of river swimming with our agency partners. We've added swiftwater lifeguards, signs, free life jackets, social media campaigns, and all of my state park staff was notifying our visitors of the dangers of the river. But somehow this message is not getting to the people who need it the most. So 16 to 24-year-old males, I'm talking to you. You are the ones drowning in these rivers at a far higher rate than anyone else. You tend to challenge yourselves or challenge your friends to do things like swim across the river or jump in fast, cold water. But what does it look like when you do not make it? That involves us and everybody behind me looking for you to try to save you, which is very unlikely in these kinds of river conditions. It involves us and our chaplains notifying your loved ones that you didn't make it. You're not coming home.
I'm worried this weekend with the cooler temperatures that the water is going to drop. And that's going to invite more people to get in, but it still is dangerous. And we're trying to keep people out of this river. So I'm looking for your help to spread that message, not only here in the local area, but to take it to the Sacramento Valley, to take it to the Bay Area, and really let people know.
Anyone wanting to recreate in rivers anytime soon should book a river trip with a professional guide service. They have training, expertise, and equipment to ensure you are safe.
This team behind you of professionals will do everything it can to try to help people when they get into this river. The unfortunate fact is that we're already behind. By the time someone ends up in the river and the 911 call is placed, that person in distress will already be hundreds of yards downriver from their original point of entry. This is a phenomenon all across the state of California. This year is different. We need to be river wise and we need to change people's mindsets. Come back in a couple of months when the river is calmer and that we can actually help you.
Okay, I wanted to start off with that video because we put this together over the last 2 months, understanding the snowpack around Placer County and what we're facing this year. I run our dive and support rescue team with the cooperation of Cal Fire, state parks. We have the first raw fire type team to the state between Cal Fire and Placer County Sheriff. And we go out and we have to be the ones that go retrieve people who get in the river, which is what we did this last Saturday. We retrieved a 19-year-old boy who jumped into the river right down the road here at Yankee Gyms and never came back out, almost a month. And it was the Mother's Day that happened, right? So that's the most horrible thing. This river is different. Our team trained in that river last Tuesday. I had 2 of my people come out of the water, so it's like feeling like they were about to die. That's how strange it is. That's how crazy it is right now. The water is flowing higher, and we got the rescue gear to be in the river, and it's extremely dangerous for us. Yeah, this is on our Facebook pages, on our Instagram. Grab that and share that with your friends. Share that with the people outside of our county, all the way to the area, Southern Cal. I share it with the New York Post. I share it with the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and different radio stations and television stations across the state. We're trying to get that out because it is different. This cooler temperatures has been a godsend for us. We haven't had the people getting into that water. As soon as those temperatures change and it gets towards those 100-degree temperatures, we're going to be out there every day on that road because people are going to need these. Get that message out for us, help us out. It gets taxing on the deputies who are out there trying to people who go in. Because our response time to get anywhere on this river is lengthy. People are not, right? Please do that for us. So changing the note on that, because that's kind of interesting, but it's important. You're going to see your deputies walking around with the best that I got on that, for most of it. It's an option for the five. It's a low-grade vest that our sheriff has brought forth to us to try to save our backs. It takes some of our equipment off the belt, put it on here. It's kind of an awesome attachment. I can easily, when I did 104 degrees, go into my office to write a paper, and I can simply take it off, throw it in the chair next to me. And then when it's time to go to that next fall, roll it on in 3-4 seconds. So we are very excited. We're excited about these pieces of equipment. They take time to order, so that is once. Obviously, I want line right away. I don't want that. Other deputies have done it. We'll start seeing them out there. Some people thought that that's so that's military. That's what it is. It's not what it's designed for. We're not a military. We're not changing anything we're doing. Because you say that it's just a different piece of equipment. We've all done it in the last month. body worn cameras. These cameras are pretty darn good when it comes to court evidence and stuff like that. It's all over, they've got people trying to link on that. It's pretty easy for me to see what's going on in that event. It took a long time for the sheriff's office to get it because this camera is fairly cheap. It's inexpensive to buy this camera and put it online. Right? However, so the amount of storage that it costs for these cameras to store all that video, when you take and you have to send it to court or get CRA public record. Remember that, if people want to pull that, we have to go through, we have to go through that. Everybody's gets all the license. There are people hired, that's all they do is sit on their computer. You can imagine, if we have an incident where there's 4 deputies on, the thing lasts for 2, 3, 4 hours. We've got all that recorded video. That's now 15, 20 hours that you've got to go through and read that. So that's where the expense came from. But now all the deputies out when they're in public will have these recording these cameras on it, and you'll see them. So be aware that that's going on. 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, we did our unified command training. That's the training that made us as good as we were. And here at the river fire, where we are back up, right next to the fire. Phenomenal training. We've got a bunch of brand new service out on the street. They learn something with that. They learn how to deal with the stress of a major incident. That first 20, 30 minutes where it's just complete chaos. So they're ready to go when that event happens. Cal Fire have always been gracious with that, working right beside us. We're doing it again July 19th on East Slope. We're going to carry that up into the mountains so we can get those people trained on that. Well, I think that's it. Unless anybody has any questions for me.
Council, any questions? Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ryan from PhD is on vacation.
Do you have anything he wanted you to pass on, maybe?
He told me something about the sheriff's office being better than the highway patrol.
I'll be sure to take that up with him. All right. Well, with that, Placer County Fire Department, Cal Fire.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Council Assistant Chief of Cal Fire, Placer County Fire Department. We'll start with our statistics for May. Our Cal Fire Station 30 here in Colfax ran 95 incidents in May. 62 of those were within Colfax city limits for page 36. And the volunteer response this month was at 12 responses without anything. Last week, we held our third of 4 returning firefighter academies for seasonal staff on. So this past Monday, we're all 2 staffing, which is for patient. Colfax Station 30 here has 2 buildings already, so no advantage there. We're holding our last 300 academy next Monday. We'll be fully staffed across all 3 counties on tomorrow. Our helicopter and model will arrive. It's an exclusive use contract for 90 days with a company called Arizona. It's a Type 2 helicopter that has a tank on it and they can respond quickly to fires around the area. It was here last year. It sits right next to the Colorado helicopter, so it will arrive for the fire season. We'll have a second helicopter that last year we positioned up in Truckee. We've decided to move it based on some weather that's going on over the past winter and how wet it is up there still. We're going to move that other helicopter down in Nassau Airport for the fire season and potentially move it up back to last week we participated in the Main Street Emergency Services meeting where we provided input from the emergency services side, myself, people of us, Tony Griffiths, to the company about the redesign of Main Street and just our input on things that us. 2 weeks ago, we sent out one of our crews from the California Conservation Colfax Center to deal with Colfax City landfill, its fuel reduction efforts. That went really well. And again, the unified command training that some groups spoke about, that is really beneficial for us too, because it gets our battalion chiefs working with those sergeants in the field. It just gets practice for both sides, puts faces to names, so that when there's a real emergency, we're not, it won't be the first time we've had a shelter going through the drill. So they actually ran through 3 different exercises that day. It was an all-day event. They had a wildland fire scenario where the fire and law got together, did evacuation of the fire. We also did a civil unrest scenario of the same sort of concept, evacuation, setting up zones of safety for the civil unrest. And then the last scenario was emergency operations center and the UFC related. Where we got to learn a little bit about how the UFC works. And any questions?
Any questions from council?
No.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I do see we have some nonprofits here this evening. Let's go ahead and start with Green Machine. If you guys want to come up and make a report or anything you guys would like to share. I don't know if you intended to, but I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot because I know 3rd of July is right around the corner.
For those that don't know, Green Machine is a nonprofit organization that raises money for the youth. Right now we have 11 groups, which is the most we've had in 12 years of being existing. And it includes Colfax High School's wrestling team, football, cheer and stunt, Nordic ski team, model UN debate group, concert choir, trap shooting, our Colfax Elementary School PTA, the Colfax Skate Park, Sierra Hill League, and Junior Falcons in football chief and cheer. What we do is we run some events, and the money that we get from those events go back to our groups, and those support their sport and projects there. Right now we're working on the 3rd of July. Right now we are standing at 1,500 donations, so it's quite low compared to what we've had before. It takes about 22,000 to run the whole event. Our biggest expense, of course, is the fireworks. They did go up significantly this year. They are at 12,500 for the show that we had last year. We are asking if the city would be willing to pay for the fireworks again this year, and also $1,000 towards the event. This year we added some extras. We added Disney characters. We're gonna have Elsa and Anna and Ariel, Little Mermaid. We're also gonna have Black Panther and Spider-Man. So they'll be here for the parades, and they'll be here to walk around and meet and greet for the kids. We also have the kids parade that will be happening for H putting that on at 6:30. The Lions Club parade will be at 7:30. We have the 2 beer gardens. It'll be Beer Machine Ran. One will be here in the art park, and the other one will be on the other side by Luminars. We have bands coming. Malarkey will be down here at this art park beer garden. And Nova Sutra, which is kind of like a rock band, and Thirsty Camel will be at the other beer garden. We also have a car show that will be happening from 4 to 7 on Railroad Street. Also on Railroad Street is the kids zone. We'll have bounce houses. We'll have a slide with water, and that'll be from 3 to 7. And then this year we decided to add a little dog race. So we will have that by the caboose down here, and that'll be from 3 to 5. And then we plan on having fireworks at 10:30.
Okay.
Right now, so we have 3 people who have donated so far. Colfax Dental Center, so we want to make recognition of that. Karen Ellis, Martin Final, and Taco Bell. We are also having a bingo this Saturday. It'll be for the event. Dinner's at 5:30, and then the game starts at 6:15. All the proceeds from that will go towards 3rd of July.
Okay, Lori, I have a question for you, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. I'm curious where we're at budgetary wise for our nonprofit contributions that we've allocated. Would you happen to have any general ideas about where we stand with that? Okay. Okay. No, that's fine. Okay, well, that's good to know. This is a really time sensitive request. When would you need an answer from the council by? Okay. I do think that we're contemplating having a special meeting, so let's go forward with the intent that we would discuss it no later than mid-June. Mid to late June, before our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other nonprofits here this evening? All right, seeing none, we can go ahead and move into our presentations for the evening. We'll go ahead and start with our fire season fuels and weather outlook presentation. Placer County Fire Department Cal Fire Assistant Chief Bob Counts. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. Jeff Lowe, the County Chief for Cal Fire, Placer County Fire Department. First off, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you and all the members here in the public in regards to what we have and what we can expect from this winter and the effects that that's going to have for the fire season. So this presentation is going to be fairly short. I have a lot of graphs and maps that can kind of demonstrate again what the winter held for us and how that should or predicted effects through the summer and what we have at. So I'll go fairly quickly through the PowerPoint. Next slide, please. So we'll go through a lot of the precipitation and the snow, and then again that fire outlook itself, some of the where we're currently at and what that translates into the future on some of this. Again, this is our statistics that we're running from previous history and what we should. So we'll go through it again, starting with what we had, what we're going to see as next one. So this is obviously the Western United States. That green, or it's kind of hard to tell, but that green area is the above average. The darker green and the darkest green is the 10th percentile on the strongest winter or wetness precipitation that we've had. And then the very dark, the darkest green is shaded. Again, most of that's in the Central California that put through is the record-breaking locations for the amount of inches that we getting. So as you can see, this winter was very active in a lot of that stuff. And then obviously the higher you go up, the more snowfall. Next one. Missing a piece. Oh, there it is. So what this is obviously kind of in conjunction with that previous map. These are the storms and when they approach that western California coastline and push inward. So you can see a lot of that from January through March was a lot of it, but also we've had a lot just recently too. A couple of the storms. Most of that is again approaching that central California, and then obviously the Oregon, Washington. So there. So what you see here is the amount of precipitation per average annually. So what the picture on the left is from 2020 or 2021 to 2022, and that red is obviously a deficit or a lower amount of water or rainfall that we previously had in the past years. And this isn't a 10-year cycle that they're going for these averages. For this last year, again, this is the 5th of this year. We're well above normal on where we ended up. You can see that by, again, the majority of it is in that California. That southern and the northern pieces or corners of California still did not get as much, but we'll kind of go into that and see how that affects the fire. So that top one is the one I'd like you guys to kind of focus on. These are the charts on our raw station. Raw stations are weather stations that are kind of placed throughout to gather a lot of this information, not only wind, but the rainfall, precipitation, temperatures, to kind of give us an understanding of what we have. A lot of this also information is where we get our fuel moistures on some of the different size fuel types for the wildland fires. You can see there, Secret Town going to be one of the closest ones that we have here. It's 165% of average. So it was 66%, or excuse me, 66 inches that we ended up getting. At that doesn't include these last couple storms we had 3 weeks or so where we got a little bit, but the average, again, 66 inches and the average was 40 inches. So you can kind of see the difference with how high we and how much water we get. And this quite honestly goes a lot on the same thing that Sergeant Rivers talked about with the rivers, but it also includes next slide. So what does this actually affect the whole, and again, one of the reasons why I did the whole California, not specifically this area, was because the resources that we have and move throughout the state. Again, Colfax is placed in between two major canyons, the North Fork and then the Bear. So one of the biggest threats to this community is the wildland fires and potential thereof. So as we go through that, a lot of the resources are going to come outside the region in case we do get some. So that's why I wanted to see or show you the biggest picture of California itself. So again, the picture on the left was 2022. This time 2022. The picture on the right is 2023. So this is the drought monitoring. This is kind of the current status of where how much fuel or moisture that the ground and the fuels have, which we were obviously in a significant drought the last few years. To where we're at now. It's just that top north side of California and that bottom corner of California are really the only things that are still on that drought. But if you go to the next slide, the drought outlook, and this is from NOAA on the effects of it. You barely see any drought in these all of California. You will have some in Oregon. And that does come into play when we talk about wildland fires on some of those outer state resources might get sucked up into fires in those specific areas, but all of California, for the most part, is looking good with our outlook. Moving to the snow. So on the far left, you have this year. The middle is 2019, and then 2017 is going to be the far right. That dark red color is the snow and the inches associated with it. And you can see on the far right, or excuse me, far left, that snow went significantly further to the west, which went a lot further downhill or slope, excuse me, and then obviously increased the amount that we have storage. And really, you can think of it as a water storage up on top of the mountains. Next slide. So there's nothing one picture, but this is just to kind of give you an idea. This is in the beginning of April when we really have that heavy snow impact. How much snow it actually is. So this is in Tahoe, but you can see on that bottom left picture, two-story apartment complex. And then on that right picture, that's that same picture just after the whole storm. So you can see in totality how much snow was actually laid up there. Most of that snow, at least in Tahoe on the lake level, has all pretty much melted, but you still have a lot of those higher elevations on that north aspect, which is hidden by the sun that's still there, and will continue producing some of that drying off period where it's going to be melting off. When it comes down, the Central Sierra, this is, and if you look at the green number, it's percentile or percent normal to the state. So if you look, we're obviously in Central Sierra, piece to that, and it's 359% above what the normal is. Again, it adjusts a little bit depending on where you're at, but ultimately, that whole area in accumulation was 359. South of us in that Southern Sierra, significantly higher, and they are impacted with significant floods, and that's going to be the Tulare and Kings kind of area on both those rivers. And then the north still got obviously impacted quite a bit, but not as much. So what does this actually mean for our reservoirs? If you take a look, and this slide is a little bit confusing, that dark blue is the normal range for our reservoirs. So kind of average all the way through. That light blue is where we're at. So if you take a look, we're not far off of where we need to be or what that normal average is. The difference, however, is how much we're actually releasing, which is again why Sergeant Griffith is so adamant on protecting the public or just the communication and notification to the public that we are raising, or they are raising the amount of water coming out. That gray line that goes up is the amount of water, again, on average, included with the snow melt. So that's on a normal year. Where we're at, including the snow melt, is that yellow line, which is significantly above. And that's why those water agencies are going to continue letting water out throughout, as you see, probably through August, as they make. So this was just a real quick slide I just wanted to show. And this is more of your leaf and bloom timing. Really what this means, and why I threw it in there is as the springtime hits and they start growing, we get that blooming. What happens is obviously the growth, but another big factor on this is those plants and vegetation will suck up that water. Because there's so much, and there was so much, basically the length of winter, you do see a significant delay when the blooming actually starts, which you're also going to see a significant delay when those plants absorb or use the amount of water needed and start dying off. So if you go to the next slide, it'll show it kind of on a graph. Again, kind of hard to tell, but your blue line is where we're at. So your normal is that dotted green line, and this is your fuel moisture. So as these fuels get wet for the winter, they're still not growing because they're not sucking up because it's winter time. As they start getting some of that water into their system, they start getting that growth. But that delay on that fuel moisture still extends after. So if you see those peaks of that green, which is normal, it peaks a lot earlier than it is right now. A good indicator would be that top right map or chart, and that blue line is significantly after. And really what this means is we're about, in certain areas are going to dictate a little bit different, but for fire season, a normal fire season, we're about 44 days behind normal, which again, for the public and what we have is a good thing. So the fire outlet itself, what are some of the scientists and experts saying about it? That green area is going to be that potential explosive fire behavior, the river fire, for instance, the mosquito. When they're in that range, that's really what the explosive is. The green is a low or below normal. The white is normal, and then the red or above. To be honest, in the last 7-8 years, that map has all been red. To let you know where we're at. This is the first time in a long time that I've seen some significant green on that map, which again is a good thing. You'll see that June, July, and then August, September. So that green below average does dissipate as we take up and those fuels start drying out. So we will get there, but again, in that August, September is really when we're going to start getting that more for spring growth. So this is the grass crop. This is in Reading, but it does indicate a good area of that lower level valley. Again, I say it up here, although there's not as much grass, we do have some grass, but it does absorb or take up resources as these fires go on. So a lot of the fires in the beginning of the season will end up being more of this grass, lower land fires that the water can get sucked up quicker and it dries up. And blooms would be a perfect example for what this fuel type kind of is. And you can see in the previous years, started in 2019, at least these pictures, and the amount, how much more, and green, to be honest, is the 2023. So there is going to be a significant more fuel compacted in these surveys. Next. So dead fuel loading, and this is really where in the area of Colfax and the outlining areas, this is really what it is a big impact. So not only do we have a normal increase on that tree mortality, and this is from the Forest Service statistics on some of these dead and dying trees, but we also had in this area at 3,000, 4,000, and a little bit below that significant impact of that snow, where we're having some of these down oaks, mainly where the branches fall down. This just ties in accumulation with the tree mortality, should just increase that fuel loading in those areas. And if you take a look where Colfax is itself is in that bottom area of that big plot at the bottom. So are there fuel type, are there a lot of dead fuels that are able to burn? Absolutely. Next slide. So this is just general outlook kind of thing, and I'll read this one more verbatim. But the forecast indicates an increase of overall temperatures. And a lot of this is going from that La Nina to that El Nino, which I'll say, I believe on the next slide, we can kind of talk a little bit about that. So over the next 2 months should be a little bit of precipitation, should be a little bit normal. You will see for the next 2 months or so, showers and thunderstorms kind of scattered throughout, which we saw a perfect example of that would be this last couple of days, where we had some of that moving over us. What can happen with that, obviously thunderstorms when it comes to summertime, is those activate or lightning starts in the hills, and that can obviously throw as we go. And then the snowpack and soil moisture may delay that summer warm up also. So I won't go into too much detail with some of this, but you've probably heard in the past couple of years that La Nina, and that's going to be that cool and dry, which is a big part of why our fire seasons were that dry piece were so active. We're kind of in that transition. We're seeing significant indicators for that transition into more of an El Nino, which is warm and wet. So this winter would be a perfect example of that kind of change to it. I will tell, I'm not a scientist, but a lot of this is going to be where that jet stream is and the temperatures of the oceanic floor as it goes and kind of forms storms and continues that process. Where that jet stream is, posted right there at Central California, and we may see if it drops below, no change, and if it drops up, we may see that more of a trend to that color. So real quick conclusion of it, with this fire season holds, we had a huge snowpack, and a lot of that is going to affect that 6,000 up, and have a really big delay on when these major fires, I guess you could say, or those potential major fires are going to happen. So so that's going to be reduced, including just the live fuel moisture, the values itself is going to be delayed, and as I said, that 44 days late is where we're at. On the negative side of that, that grass crop was able to grow to its full capabilities with all that water. So in a lot of cases, those will keep on growing until that moisture goes away and then they start dying. So really, we have in the valley floors a lot of thick grass, which is going to increase the considerability the BTUs as it pushes forward, and you will see some fire at that lower level, especially in the next few months. And then with the snowfall and I guess the impacts of some of these big storms and all the branches and trees that did fall, that 3,000, I'll even put it 2,500, which is this Colfax area up to the 4,000, where you will see that those impacted trees. A lot of what those do is those increase, you'll get that surface fire into that heavier fuel, which will then push it up into the canopy. And that's what you could see here as soon as you start coming out. And then again, that transition from La Nina to El Nino, and that change depending on that pitch. So I will say kind of the conclusion of this, you heard Chief Counts talk about the staffing that we have, and increasing staffing in the next 2 weeks, including helicopters, CWN helicopters and our crews and dozers and all that staffing. And we are prepared to extinguish these fires as they do approach, although it will be later on than a normal fire. That's about all I have. And let's see.
All right, with that, do we have any questions from council? Any from the public? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute recess before we get started on the second half of the agenda. Thank you.
They need
seats again so we can get started. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call this back to order. At this time, we're gonna go ahead and proceed with our public hearings for the evening, starting with item 6A. This is the 143 Whitcomb Avenue project. So I'm gonna have our staff come on up and give a presentation.
Council, members of the public, my name is Emmanuel Oversee. I'm the Director of the Planning Department. This item before us this evening is a request for design review for a self-service storage facility at 143 Whitcomb Avenue. Next screen. The property is located about 1,000 feet west of South Auburn Street. It's shown in red in this exhibit. It's on the north side of Whitcomb Street or Whitcomb Avenue. It's about 2.5 acres in size. Next. So the project in summary has 11 different buildings, 10 are single story. One of the buildings traverses a transition slope and has a 2-story element to it. The buildings vary in size from 1,400 square feet to just over 17,500 square feet. Roughly 50,000 square feet of total building size. There are 333 rentable storage units, plus 1 space for a manager's office near the building entrance. Next. So the yellow on this plan shows the building locations. They're identified with letters, starting with building A, kind of just to the right of the main entrance, where that red line is going across parallel to Whitcomb Avenue. That's the main entrance into the facility. Building B is to the left, perpendicular to the roadway. Building is around the perimeter. F on the east side. Building F backs up to an open drainage channel. At the Whitcomb side of that building towards building G, that drainage channel enters an existing drainage pipe, storm pipe, 48-inch storm drain pipe. And then building H is adjacent to Railroad Avenue. That section of Railroad Avenue currently is not paved. As a condition of approval of this project, that would be paved. And then buildings J and K and A are back up to Whitcomb Avenue. The applicant would be required to add a sidewalk and landscaping along Whitcomb Avenue as a condition of approval. We have other conditions related to the placement of building G. That building encroaches into, or let me rephrase that. The staff report I wrote for the May 24th meeting, that building encroached into a 10-foot easement. The applicant has revised it, and that revision is shown in this plan. So that now meets the 10-foot setback or 10-foot easement width. So the backside of building G no longer encroaches into an easement. Next slide. These next 3 or 4 slides show the street-facing elevations of the buildings. They have added some articulation to the roof. They have the canopies over the windows. They have shown in the center is a grill for vines that could grow on the building. And then they use a mixture of brick, concrete masonry units, and vertical siding. And you'll see these similar elements if you can just go through the next 3 slides. Next, and next. All right, so one of the conditions of approval is to add articulation similar to what was shown on the buildings you just saw to the other perimeter buildings around the property. This is the exhibit that indicates the location of existing and proposed easements on the site. The staff report goes into great detail as to the location of all of these easements, which are to remain and which are to be removed. I think the kind of most significant changes on the far left side of this exhibit along the west property line. There's an existing access easement. That access easement had been graded by a previous property owner, rendering that access easement unusable. The applicant will restore the grade in that area so vehicles could use that access easement. And that is an access easement for the benefit of the adjoining properties. The easements that kind of run through towards the left side of the property, but not along the property line from the Wickham Avenue towards the rear property line, those easements will be abandoned. They followed a prior property line that used to exist in that location. The long blue easement from the very back towards the front, that is a new easement that would replace an easement that followed the east property line. And that again would be for the benefit of the property owner to the north. And then the other easements would remain mostly intact. There's a few minor encroachments to the 10-foot easement along the Wickham Ave frontage. Next. So there are several land use policies that apply to the project, including the general plan, zoning, and design guidelines. The site is designated for industrial use in the land use map. And the staff report goes into great detail, pages 85 through 88, as to the policies, general plan policies that apply. The zoning is light industrial, and there are supplemental standards for industrial facilities, self-storage facilities contained in the zoning code. And then there are a set of design guidelines also that apply. Next. The land use entitlements, the action before you this evening is consideration of a design review application. There are 4 design review standards. The analysis of how the project relates to those design review standards are contained in the staff report. This slide and the next slide is findings that are required to be made. Go on to the next. Okay. And the next slide. The project also is subject to California Environmental Quality Act. It meets the definition of a project. There are categorical exemptions that CEQA requires us to first look at. This project does qualify as under a class 32 infill exemption for an infill development project. And the findings related to each of these criteria are contained in the staff report. Next. So our recommendation is that the City Council approve the design review application and adopt the resolution that is attached, along with the attached conditions of approval. One of the things I would like to point out, we did receive a letter from a neighbor, Mr. Back. We did meet with him. I met with him multiple times. There were many changes made to the project as a result of his input into the project, particularly as it relates to the easements across the property. One of the points he raises in his letter is regarding grading and the prior grading that has occurred. As through this process, a grading permit will be required to be issued so that prior grading that was done with or without a permit would be cured. So we're not going back. We're looking forward, and through this process that concern gets addressed. So with that, unless council has any questions, I conclude my presentation.
All right, thank you. I'm going to cover some brief procedural items. So this is a public hearing tonight. Because this is a public hearing, we do have a very specific order of protocol we're going to follow to go through the process here. So we received our presentation from staff. Next, I'm going to open the public hearing, which will open the opportunity to accept testimony. We'll start with testimony from the applicant. We'll then accept public testimony. Then we will accept testimony from anybody who is, I apologize, then we will have the rebuttal period where the applicant will have an opportunity to come back up and address questions or comments that came up from the public for or against the project. And then at that point, after we've accepted all testimony, I will close the public hearing, at which point we will not accept any more public comment. It will come back to council where we will have a discussion and come forward with a decision. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing, and I'm going to invite the applicant to please come up to the podium. And if there's anything you'd like to say or share, this is a great opportunity.
My name is Jim Manconi. I've been involved in the storage business for the last 25 years. I have built 11 or 10 properties. This is my 11th one. So I have quite a bit of experience developing self-storage. This is one of the smaller ones that I've done. If you have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer anything you have.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right. So at this time, we can take public testimony. If anybody'd like to come on up. And I would encourage anybody who does want to speak on it, and you can do it either before or after you speak. I would encourage anybody who speaks to fill one of these out because it really helps our city clerk do her job to accurately document our minutes following the meeting. This is a speaker card. They are not required, but it is a huge help to our clerk.
Hello, my name's Nolan Brogy. I own a piece of property off of Whitcomb Avenue that this project is going to engulf on two sides. There's a stream involved, and in 2003, I had a survey done by a surveyor from up in Forest Hill. I can't remember, Mike Martin, I believe his name was. But anyway, he's a reputable person, and showed that the stream had been moved, and they moved it up against the property that I had purchased. I'm wondering how this project is going to address the stream in its present area. And I'm also wondering, I think that exposed some kind of a water issue over there. I'm sure they're going to have to address that as well. But also, I'd like to know, I received some paperwork several years ago saying in the general plan that my property could be light industry, commercial, or it's preferably residential. I'm wondering, is that an issue to change it now that this is going into like storage or some sort of light industry?
So I think it would be best if we, I think it would be best if we actually had our planner come back up to the podium to address that question.
Okay, thank you.
So if you don't mind.
So with regard to the drainage channel on the east side of the property, the condition of approval is that the applicant install riparian vegetation in that area to have a basically a green belt, create a green belt between the neighbor's property, the vacant property, and the subject property. With regards to your property and the zoning of the property and the land use designation, it is designated for residential use and zoned for residential use. If you're interested in changing that, that would be a legislative act by the city council to make that amendment. And if you'd like to initiate that process, you can contact me. I'll let you know the steps to go through. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have additional public testimony?
I live in Mint Creek and I was wondering where the drainage water is going to go down through.
Manuel, you're popular tonight.
So as part of the design, all of the water that runs off the site before it leaves the site is required under state law to be cleaned through. There's an on-site drainage medium that the water is filtered through, and that actually is contained. If you want to go, Marguerite, to the site plan, I think it was about the second or third slide. Next slide. There you go. So the areas shown in blue, those are the drive aisles. Under the drive aisles, or incorporated in the drive aisles, is it's a different product that I haven't seen used very frequently. I can let the applicant describe it in a little more detail. But in essence, that water, all the storm water gets filtered before it is then discharged into the existing storm drain pipe that is buried and goes under Wickham Avenue. The dashed lines between building K and J that go under the street. That is the location of the existing 48-inch storm drain pipe. So it drains down under the street and continues southward across properties to the south.
So can you wait a minute? So it won't go through Mint Creek?
The question is, will the project go through Mint Creek? And I understand the answer to be no.
Okay, because
It will go to the storm sewer.
we don't get any help in repairing any of those. So that's why it's important that it's not.
Thank you. Do we have additional public testimony? Okay. So we do have the letter. Oh, come on up.
Head back. I hope you had a chance to read my letter. I'd like to make a couple additional comments here in regard to this. I'm a property owner that's been very severely adversely affected by the illegal grading that took place many years ago. And a couple of things I'd like to point out here. The location of this project does not meet the requirements of CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act exemption. And I don't believe that this project is exempt. As my letter pointed out, there are exceptions to category exemptions, and there's also requirements. And I went through the little things, the exceptions there initially out, and so that you could have a chance to do it. And hopefully, I thought, I did quote the code. There's you can always get on the internet and read the code yourself, and it's killed. Number one, the project is not an infill development. That's just right there, you right up. The location of the project does not meet California Public Resources Code section 21061.3. These requirements for infill site. And it gives a definition for infill site. Infill site means urbanized areas that meets either of the following criteria. That's a direct quote from that. And if you went through that, it doesn't meet that criteria. And I'm going to say it says infill site means a site in an urbanized area. Okay, CEQA guidelines section 15387. There's a definition of urbanized area. And this is good. Urbanized area means a central city or a group of cities with a population of 50,000 people or more, together with adjacent densely populated areas having a population density of at least 1,000 people per square mile. I don't believe Colfax meets that requirement. So, in other words, in infill development, you have a urbanized area, and it's a project that's been developed before or is surrounded by areas, and if you can think like urban redevelopment agency or some of those projects would certainly fit for that need. For CEQA guidelines section 15387, I'm sorry, I just gave you that one. Okay, now if you look at this particular site, it started out with a massive illegal grading by the former property owner, Mr. Cunningham, who was a grading contractor. He did the grading over Thanksgiving, basically Thanksgiving holiday and into the weekend, and working well into the night, putting this lights on his earth moving equipment. So many of the effects of this grading have never been mitigated. Now, what used to be the city's drainage easement comes from the upper point on that and flows down essentially to, if you've been out there, what's known as Mr. Cunningham made two pads out of just there. And so what happened is the first winter, Mother Nature took over, and Mr. Cunningham had attempted to put the drainage in a channel along the eastern property line. And his grading and some of that is, some of it is up to nearly a vertical cut bank. If you get into the grading ordinance requires a cut bank of slope and certain requirements there. So anyway, Mr. Cunningham attempted to divert the flow, but first winter was a lot of erosion. Mother Nature took over and basically went to the area that's over channel, went to about where that center section of buildings is. Mr. Cunningham extended the culvert under Whitcomb Avenue, and I think the staff report says approximately 150 feet. Well, that takes it up to that corner of, I think it's Mr. Gordon's property. And so the Mother Nature bringing the corner down to it, and then at that time, I think Cunningham put a load of rock and stuff and cut a channel from basically center of the railroad pad over to that outfit. And so anyway, to make the gift, you now have essentially three channels. We have one along the cut bank. We have one where the city easement exists. And then you have one where the full slope of the upper pad joins. And I think the biological report and the staff report indicates about that deal. So to summarize it all, you have three cut slopes, three drainage areas, and that's not conducive to a CEQA violation, a CEQA exemption. So what I read, anytime you have a drainage course of bridges, it's a significant thing.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we did run out of time, and I need to have you wrap up your thoughts very quickly so we can continue with the hearing.
Okay, I can do that. The project site does not meet the Public Resources Code, but in the proposed ordinance, you're saying it's exempt. But yet, item 32 of the proposed ordinance has a CEQA requirement, and it's either exempt from CEQA or it isn't. So you can't say the project's exempt and still have a CEQA requirement. And that's pretty well litigated. So my final question is, will any effort be made to bring this illegally graded area into compliance with city grading ordinance?
I think that's a fair question, and if we can give the city planner maybe an opportunity to give some responses to some of the things you brought up, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, I'd like to close by saying I think the resolution should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We did consider all of the input provided by Mr. Back very carefully. With regard to the infill exemption that we're relying upon for review under CEQA, the section of CEQA that Mr. Back is referring to is the Public Resources Code. The exemption is in the CEQA guidelines. The CEQA guidelines have their own set of definitions, different from the definitions in the Public Resources Code. And the state legislature made several changes to CEQA to allow for infill development of specifically for housing, is to encourage development of housing. The Class 32 exemption has its own definition, and it meets that definition of infill. And then with regards to the grading, as I mentioned in my initial remarks, as part of the project, a grading permit will be required and the applicant will be required to comply with current grading standards for alterations to the site.
Thank you. Do we have additional public testimony anybody would like to add? Do we have any online? Okay, so at this time, I'll go ahead and call the applicant back up. Would you like to provide any comments following the public testimony?
Well, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on what Emily was talking about with the drainage. We're going to be using a product called TrueGrid, and TrueGrid absorbs much of the water in the ground. It leaches into the ground. Plus, there's 8 inches of rock of clean washed granite rock. And so what happens is in that 8 inches, 40% of that is considered a void, so that water will accumulate in the grid itself and eventually will leach into the ground. The only time it would potentially exceed is if we had a 100-year flood or something like that. It might possibly overflow, but that's not typically the situation, is that the water would absorb into the ground through the grid.
Then we would expect overflow drainage to go into the storm drain at that point.
Into the creek is ultimately the safest place to put it. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's been used. I don't know if I saw you nodding your head. You might know about it. It's been used in many parking lots and many areas where heavy equipment operates, where the large trucks are driven over it, and it's very stable, very solid. It's the way to deal with this water drainage issue, because for developers, that's a huge issue for us, because you have to store your water on site for the most part. And, storing storage tanks and long driveways with 3-foot culvert. I mean, it's a very expensive, long process. And this product addresses that issue. And we want to keep as much water on site as possible.
Wonderful.
So,
do you have any additional comments at all before I end up closing this part of the hearing?
I trust Emmanuel. I think he's thoroughly examined the issue that was just brought up. And we've done everything we can to please Mr. Back. We've made significant changes throughout the property to accommodate him. So I'm asking for your vote, because I think we've done everything we're supposed to do.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close the public testimony. We're going to go ahead and bring it forward. I apologize. Let me be more clear. The public hearing is now closed. That includes public testimony. I'm going to bring it back to council for comments and questions so we can have a discussion on the item. If you don't mind, I want to open it up with a question to Mick regarding what level of discretion we have over alterations to the design you presented tonight.
Really a better question for Amanda, but you have relatively limited discretion here. You can make adjustments to the design as you see fit, but they have to be reasonable.
Okay. All right, with that.
I just hope we've addressed the concerns that are out there. That's all I have. Looks like we've done a pretty good job of tailoring this project to the site and making sure that we've covered most of the issues that come up with projects like this. So thank you for all your hard work, Manny.
I do have a question, and I'm going to actually ask Mr. Beck, if you don't mind coming back up to the podium. I do have a question for you, if that's okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So I understand that over the course of the last couple decades, you have been severely wronged. I understand that your property was severely damaged by someone who chose not to follow proper law, order, and procedure and took it upon themselves to make changes that damaged your property. With that being said, I think I'd like to better understand. I understand that you are wanting to have a CEQA review, if I understand correctly. I guess I'd like to know what you are hoping to see out of the CEQA review that has not been done so far, so we can address if there are any shortcomings to what has been done. Because I do agree with Emmanuel's evaluation of the definitions within the CEQA requirements for infill development. But I think it would help us as a council to understand what you believe would change about the project if we did force it to go through CEQA. That way I understand what we're potentially depriving you of.
Well, I think number one, you're talking about drainage, and it definitely affects the city drainage. The upstream drainage is very, very necessary for downstream aquatic life. And so, that needs to be addressed instead of blowing it off and say, well, it doesn't matter. Because that's the food source and food chain downstream aquatic life. I also think that you've got some of the grading problems, you've got the vertical cut bank. Now, you're talking about moving the drainage easement over along this near vertical cut bank. And it's an open door for future slippage. My question is, there enough space in what suppose you put the drainage as well as to correct that, that is near vertical cut bank. There's ever slope on the other property that definitely are affected by that parameter. So that was my question. Is now we're going to bring this into ordinance, or we're just going to blow it off and say, oh, that's okay. Somebody can go and do this massive thing, and then we'll sign it on and then get by with it.
So my understanding then is that your desire for CEQA is because you feel the studies done to date are inadequate. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, there's mitigation measures that need to be made. And typically when you do the study, then you propose mitigation so that done that, we mitigate. Nothing wrong with the development.
Yeah.
You have to mitigate the effects.
Well, thank you for answering my questions. I do appreciate it. That does help me understand a little more context here. It is my understanding that we have proposed a number of mitigations and we have done studies that would mitigate some of these concerns. I think that there is a little bit of a lack of consensus around what study methodology would be most appropriate. It sounds like you feel CEQA process would be most appropriate, and our staff has used other processes that they feel are appropriate. So that definitely helps me to better understand the playing field of our conversation. Thank you. I did technically close the public testimony, and unless council specifically asks the question, it would be inappropriate for me to reopen it. Unless you. Okay.
No, public hearing's closed.
So at this point, council, is there any questions or comments, discussion?
Go ahead.
I'll ask Manuel to come back up. So could you explain a little bit more about the drainage design? Just how it's covered. I know it's going against a cut bank, but we're going to provide mitigations for that cut bank to ensure it stays stable and is covered for the drainage.
That is
correct. And we're not going off CEQA. So CEQA has a level of review that you go through, and the first thing you do is determine whether a activity is considered a project under CEQA. This is a project. Then the second is determine whether a categorical or statutory exemption applies. This categorical exemption applies. We had some analysis. We retained a biologist to study the site, take a look at the site. It meets all 5 criteria under the class 32 infill exemption. It meets the definition of infill exemption as defined in the CEQA guidelines, which is where that class 32 exemption is located, not in the Public Resources Code. The applicant is then required to comply with a myriad of state, local regulations related to drainage, to grading, to erosion control, bank stability. All of that is already part of the municipal code and applicable state regulations. So mitigations are built in, if you will, into the regulations that apply. So for instance, we talked about that the water will be treated and retained on site before it is discharged into the creek. As a condition of approval, they'll be required to install riparian landscape, riparian vegetation along that drainage channel. It's a 20-foot wide drainage easement, which is adequate to handle the capacity of water. So I think all the steps have been gone through. It is subject to SEQA. We reviewed it under SEQA and found it to be exempt as a class 32 exemption.
And you feel the mitigation measures that are in place are substantial enough to solve any erosion issues or anything like that?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Emmanuel, sorry, one more question to be very redundant here, but to make sure we've been transparent and clear. Those mitigation measures were identified by what type of professionals?
So we had a biologist review the project and propose mitigations. The biological report is attached to the staff report, and then we had the city engineer look at the drainage facilities that are proposed. So those are the two applicable fields expertise that reviewed them.
Wonderful. I appreciate you. Thank you. Okay. Well, Kim?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment to Ted and all other citizens at Colfax. Any neighbor that is going to be affected or thinks they will be affected, it would help people in the city council if, instead of waiting until we're about to cross the finish line, if we had more advance notice to give us time to go out on our own time and investigate these problems and try to look at both sides of the story. It would just be helpful for city council people. So I'm just making a generic comment that it would be helpful if we didn't have to wait till the 11th hour and then.
To be fair, we did have these comments since May.
Well, May of 2023 or May of.
I'd like to say something. I wasn't even notified about it.
Yeah, I apologize. But no, I appreciate the sentiment. I just need to make sure that we procedurally are fair to everybody in the audience. So with that being said, we do have a decision tonight, and I do have one more question. Emmanuel, prior to the public hearing, could you please speak to the noticing requirements?
Sure. So we're required to provide notice at least 10 days before a public hearing to all property owners within a 500 or 300 foot radius of the project site. Notice is also provided in the local paper, posted in 3, probably 72 hours in advance in compliance with the Brown Act. I would note that I did meet with Mr. Back I think initially in October or November of 2022. And he alerted me to his concerns with the easements. I spoke with the applicant, and the applicant made significant changes to the plans to address those concerns. I had extensive conversations multiple times with Mr. Back at the planning counter regarding his grading concerns with the project. And then the neighbor who owns the residential property just to the east, he came in and we met at the counter, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so I think everyone who, at least the parties that are here this evening, have been involved for several months, in a few weeks for one of the other parties.
Thank you for providing that clarification. I'm going to sidetrack the entire conversation for a moment. I did see that, and this may just be the way that the designs have been drawn in this case. Are you planning to paint the buildings red? Yes, I am. I am asking you to come on up to the podium. Sorry about that.
We're not going to paint them red. They're going to come from the fact we, already painted or already colored. We do have several colors of that, kind of a rust color.
Okay.
Trying to find something that blends into that area and makes it a little more attractive. Because typically, if you look at storage facilities everywhere, they're usually gray walls or white walls or anything like that. We tried to enhance it a little bit to make it look more attractive for the.
So on that note, everybody's going to have their own definition of what they think is attractive or appropriate for any part of town and whichever part of our districts in town. Council, feel free to check me here if I'm off base. I know that storages are typically, you know, again, this is industrial zoning and all that. They do look very industrial. I will give it that. My concern is if they are going to be very brightly colored in this industrial format, I am worried about the amount of attention it draws that might not necessarily be positive.
We were asked to enhance it.
Right.
To make it more attractive. And
that's where I know my opinion here is controversial because again, everybody has a different opinion of what looks good.
It's not glowing red by any means. It's going to be more of a rust color kind of. You know.
So a lot more muted.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not going to be a bright red.
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to have bright red barn color. Big old facility right behind Marvell's.
There's also some brick. We have some brick in the front, along the front as well. Several buildings have a brick wainscoting type of thing right along the base of the buildings.
Okay.
To add a little bit more character to them. What Emmanuel had asked us to do was to design a facility that had an older look to it, rather than the newer modern look.
Yeah.
And so we tried to kind of incorporate the older design look to it, and to make it more in line with what's in the community of Colfax.
I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad to hear it's going to be a much more muted color than what we're seeing here on the screen.
Yeah.
Because to me, it definitely popped out as being hyper modern, just because of that bright red color, and I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. So I digress. Does council have any facelift level comments?
I was going to say, looking at our buildings here, Main Street, there's red and then there's a muted rusty red. And so, you know, there's different definitions of red. And
originally we had a brighter color, and I had the architect reduce it down to a more rusty color. And it probably doesn't show up in the drawing, but that's what I've done is I've reduced it down to a more rusty color. And I'll pay specific attention to that when we actually
receive the materials.
Yeah, I'll make sure.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Oh, do you have something to give us a visual?
Well, what I was going to suggest, I have a condition of approval suggested that I was concerned with the use of reflective roofing material. And so one of the conditions of approval is that they come in with a sample of the roofing material. We can have them do the same thing for the red siding.
That would be fantastic. If you don't mind, I would really appreciate that condition. Just to make sure that we're on the same page and it doesn't end up being something that we as council end up receiving numerous complaints about. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, we are at the point of the item to address city council action. I am proposing that we consider that condition addition that we just discussed. Are there any other condition changes that the council would like to entertain before we entertain a motion?
the extras,
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
go for it.
I move to approve item 6A.
Second.
Design
With the
review
conditions.
application with the conditions.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes and we will move to item 6B. This is the public hearing for delinquent sewer service charges and refuse collection fees. This will follow the same protocol as the prior item, where we will receive a presentation from staff. We will open the public hearing, at which point we will take public testimony, close the public hearing, and then bring it back to council for action and questions. Lori, take it away.
Okay, I always clear the room. Must be that I'm a finance person. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll give everybody a moment to settle.
Good evening, council members. Lori Van Groningen, Finance Director.
Tonight, we're talking about our annual process to collect delinquent sewer service charges and delinquent refuse collection charges on the secured tax roll through the county. Our code authorizes that we can use this process. It requires that we have a resolution and that before that resolution, that we have a public hearing. This is a beneficial process for the city. If we weren't able to collect the delinquents this way through the tax rolls, we'd be doing individual collection of items. Currently, there's on the most current report, there's $131,000 of delinquent sewer charges, 13,000 of refuse collection charges. That was, I believe, 92 accounts for sewer, and I have the numbers written down. I should quote those more exact. 20 garbage accounts. Generally, what happens is we hold this process and we still receive payments before at the end of July that we actually put this onto the tax roll. So history shows that those balances usually come down before we do that. I think that's the extent of my presentation, unless there's something critical that I've missed.
All right. Thank you very much. At this point, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing and accept public testimony. Do we have any public testimony on the item tonight?
I get to do a double duty here. So. Hold it out.
Thank you. And for the public here tonight, because this is a public comment that you're providing, do you mind reading? I don't know if you still have a copy of what you've provided. Do you mind reading it for the public? Please.
Okay, I address it to Honorable Mayor and City Council members, City of Colfax to date. But please revise and change Exhibit A, report of delinquent sewer charge and refuse collection fees. The sewer bill for this address has been continually paid on time without a delinquency. And B, the attached letter to Recology states Recology has never collected any refuse from this address. This address owes Recology nothing. Again, please revise and change Exhibit A. Thank you. Now the letter to Recology, as I put the deal spill. This letter is in response to your letter dated 19 May 2023. Number one, I do not have a contract, agreement, or purchase order with Recology. Number two, as you know, Recology has never picked up any trash, rubbish, garbage, or solid waste at this address. I have paid dump fees for all trash, rubbish, and solid waste that I've taken to the transfer station. You know full well that we owe Recology nothing, and I signed that for the property owner. So there you go.
So I do have a question to provide some context there. Did Recology ever provide you a reason why they are attempting to collect fees from you? Did anybody explain a reason?
I've never had never gone to pick up anything. Okay. Now, when the city collected the garbage, if by state law, the city can do that. Well, but the money goes into city coffers.
Yes.
But a private business that has a franchise is a little different situation. And so for the city to collect a kickback fee is because they pandered the people to do. In other words, if the city was picking up the garbage, which they used to do, then you're obligated to pay. But like I said, that goes into, if you don't put garbage out, that goes into your city coffers. But, a private business, such as a franchise, it's like there's a cable by the place, but for cable TV.
So here's the difference between the situation with cable TV as a utility versus trash service. Trash service in the state of California, we have the right as a city to enter into a franchise agreement with a private collection service because of the way our solid waste management services work. And so we have entered into a franchise agreement with Recology, who performs those required services on our behalf. Every address, and I believe it's every residential address within the city limits, is legally required by both state law and our ordinances to have an account with Recology, to pay the account with Recology, and to make sure those refuse services are available to ensure that there is sanitary conditions for all APNs within our jurisdiction. I'll let Mick elaborate.
The better way to say that is the ordinance requires a mandatory subscription. Everybody has to subscribe to garbage collection and pay for it. Whether you use it or not is a different matter, but everyone is required to subscribe.
I would question that because there are towns in this county, more or less, that cities, I should say, that if you don't subscribe to the service, you don't get the service. And Auburn is one of those.
That is correct, but we're not talking about Auburn or any other city. The city of Colfax has enacted an ordinance which is permissible under state law, which requires everybody to subscribe to and pay for garbage collection service.
And I don't know how long that's been in place for well over 20 years, I believe.
I don't know about the mandatory subscription. But I know that's been in effect since at least shortly after I came here about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. It's been in effect for a long time. And prior to Recology, by the way, the service was provided by Tahoe Truckee.
Municipal utility district.
No, it's not a municipal utility district. It's a private company too.
When Tahoe Truckee was a contractor for the city picked it up. Recology is not a contractor for the city. The Recology is
we entered into the same form of franchise agreement with Recology that we did with Tahoe Truckee.
That's correct.
It is the same type of agreement, and we received the same format of fees from them that we do from Recology. We did not change the format of the agreement or the format of the arrangement. We simply went to a different service provider because it was more advantageous for the constituency.
Well, I could add that I put considerable time, as other members of the community did, on the solid waste program, the volunteers, the citizens group, and support the city. And so I'm not ignorant on the contract you had with the Tahoe Truckee was a contractor for, but the city actually did the picking up. They just did that. And so I like to say, if you didn't put a can out or something, then, and the city even sent the bills out. If you didn't put a can out, the city got the money and then paid, they paid a contractor to do the physical work, but it was the city that did it. In this case, Recology has a contract with the city as a franchise with the city, and Recology has exclusive rights for street cleaning in the city. I don't know how often you've seen a street sweeper in the city, but Recology has exclusive rights to that, and not all streets in the city are required to be swept. So, it's not the same contract that you had with Tahoe Truckee.
So I feel like we are digressing from the issue at hand. Your request here is for us to eliminate this particular account from the tax rolls. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Your request here today is for us to have the account for parcel 006-944-007 eliminated from our collection with the tax rolls. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm saying Recology picked up nothing from there, and refuse from that side has been taken to the transfer station and paid for at the transfer station.
So I want to thank you for your testimony at this time. Unfortunately, we did run out of time some time ago, and I did give additional time because I had interrupted you with a couple of questions. But at this point, we do need to continue to move forward, and we would be happy to further this discussion and consideration when it comes back to council for a decision. But we do understand what your request is at this time.
Well, thank you.
So thank you. All right, do we have any additional public testimony on this item? Any online?
Nothing online.
Okay, well, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and we're going to come back to council for decision-making on the item. Do we have additional conversation?
I don't have any comments on this item.
Well, the only comment I would have is if it's a state law, it's difficult to go against a state law. And then if we did allow it, Ted, what would happen if somebody would say, well, I didn't put any trash out this week. I didn't have any. So therefore, can I skate out of one payment? So it kind of opens the door for people saying, I didn't have any trash to put out, so I should be able to skip the payment.
So here's my concern on this item and the request we received tonight. We did not receive this in the form of a request for a variance from an existing ordinance, nor did we receive it in the request for a council hearing for determination. This is the first time that we are seeing this tonight. Based on the facts that have been presented, I have no reason to believe that this was an inaccurate billing, but rather a misunderstanding of what our ordinances are. And the clarification that we can provide tonight is that we do have an ordinance that has been on the books for many, many years that does require all parcels within the city limits subscribe to Recology's refuse services for the sake of maintaining a sanitary environment within the city limits. I can't tell you how many people have been in this exact same situation. I do not have any way of knowing how many people have been put on the tax rolls because they did not know that they needed to subscribe to Recology. I would not have a way of knowing that unless they came in here and specifically told us that that was their understanding and that we had that issue. With that being said, I do not see substantial evidence that would put me in a position to exclude this from the tax rolls tonight, as this has been an ongoing law for some time.
I actually looked it up while we were going through the discussion here. It's been mandatory since July 1, 1980, so 33 years.
So with that being said, I'm not in a position tonight to grant this request. And I would be inclined to approve the tax rolls as they were presented by staff tonight. Do I have a motion? Okay. Oh, okay, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, motion passes and we have closed that item. With that, we're going to move to public comment. This is the part of the agenda where we will accept comments on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if anybody has public comment, this is the time to speak. I'm going to go ahead and start with Ingrid, who did go ahead and submit a speaker card. Do we still have Ingrid here tonight? She's already left. Has she jumped online by chance, Marguerite?
No, I don't see her online.
Okay, I'm going to have to owe her an apology. Well, with that, we can go ahead and take public comment in the room without speaker cards then. So Tom, if you want to come on up.
Good evening. I'm Tom Parnham. I live in the city. I've got just a couple of things. I noticed online that the city council extended the deadline for applicants. And it appears that the city's not happy with the existing pool of candidates. And I can't help but notice that David's nameplate is missing and he wasn't part of the roll. There's been no explanation and we're almost done with this meeting. And the city deserves to know what's going on.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of, I just want to say that there's a lack of communication and transparency. I understand The city's in a big turmoil right now, but I believe that should have been addressed up front.
Thank you, Tom, and I'd like to take personal accountability for that. Our lovely clerk here actually reminded me to make an announcement, and I foolishly forgot to make that announcement. We do have an item on the agenda tonight to have a discussion pertaining to the council appointments, at which point we will go over the circumstances of why you see 3 sitting council members here tonight that constitute your entire council at this time. But I also want to take personal accountability too for the fact that we prematurely sent out an extension notice. We received applicants for council after the posted due date due to some confusion among the disbursement of the information. And as a result, we were told by our city attorney that we did have the discretion to still consider those applicants. We did not feel, and by we, I mean the selection committee that existed prior to us being a 3-person council. We did not feel it would have been appropriate to consider those applicants without extending the duration of the applicant window. I gave direction to city staff to go ahead and post the extension to the window for that purpose. I was notified afterwards by our city attorney that it would actually take the full council consideration for us to make that, and that we had not granted that power to the subcommittee. So that is my fault entirely, and I apologize to the applicants who felt slighted by that. In no way, shape, or form was it a slight to the applicants, because we have several excellent candidates currently, but rather an attempt to make sure we were being inclusive to all interested parties without denying the opportunity to others. So that's where we stand, and I appreciate your public comment. And at this time, we'll accept additional public comment. So if anyone else has public comment this evening. What's that? Oh,
No.
I don't see Ingrid.
No.
No. Jim, your turn.
Jim Dion, Golden State Patient Care Highway 174. Thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. First thing I'd like to say is a couple of nights ago when we had a meeting, I didn't realize that I was kind of insulting the sheriff. About my business and the disagreement we have. And I was assured it wasn't about me or my business. It was just policy. So I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize if there was any misunderstanding with you. I didn't mean to do that. Secondly, I kind of explained about my taxes last week and how it's killing me. I'm at 28% tax, and that's not even counting the employee tax I have to pay and other things. And so I just wanted to hit on that briefly and let the city know that it's way out of line what the taxes I'm having to pay. Not just the city, I've got to pay excise tax now that used to go from the garden, and now I get to have that privilege. So the reason I want to speak tonight, though, is another subject about the money. Everybody thinks Jim's a millionaire because he's got this business and he sells all this stuff. Well, that's not true. But I think some of you will remember, Trinity, you probably remember the workshop we had, and we discussed in there implementation of about, there was at the time discussion about 5 licenses for the city of Colfax. I believe it was 2 retail, 1 manufacturing, 1 distribution, 1 testing, something like that. Anyway, there were 5. And it was decided at the time to hire a company to make sure that all those licenses were in compliance. And so we were going to split that between the 5 different companies. And I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars it is. I want to say 40,000. I'm not sure, Mick, you might know. That was supposed to be split 5 ways, and everybody's going to pitch in on that. Well, what happened, the other applicants was discovered that they weren't in compliance because of the zoning. And so they all dropped out. But HDL was let go because of their questionable tactics, I might say. And so we hired Kyle, which is, he's a good guy, but he's the one, I call him a babysitter. He comes in occasionally and goes through our making sure that we're in compliance with everything and everything's paid for. And we've never had a blemish ever. But I think that now that there aren't 5 businesses, there's only one, I'm having to pay that whole thing. So here's my renewal application, which I don't know how many businesses in town have to renew their business application. Doesn't really matter. But just for the privilege of being able to renew my business license, the application fee is non-refundable renewal fee of $904 is what I pay for the privilege of filling out a renewal application. In addition to that, my business license, now in Colfax, I don't think anyone pays more than $550 for their business license. I know there's one guy in town, pretty big guy here, his business license is $1. Mine, $7,187 for my business license, which is extravagant. And I know you can do it, but it's, unconscionable to me how I can be charged hundreds of percent more. Now, in addition to the $7,000 and the $900, I also get to pay the implementation fee, which I just discussed about the 5 companies pitching in to pay this fee. Since it's only me, that amount this year comes to $9,691. So this month I get to come up with $17,782 just for the privilege of having a business in Colfax. I think that's I don't want to say discrimination, but it sure isn't fair to have me have to pay that much. I'm hoping that perhaps we can amend this $9,000 and, help me not have such a large hit. I know Kyle needs to be paid, but I'm not too sure that the city needs to pay themselves to take care of this when it's already done. Now, the final thing I'd like to do, I know I'm out of time, is I don't know if since we have a quorum here, we can pass a resolution to amend my business license to include allowing me to at least deliver adult use in Colfax. I would appreciate that if we could, I don't know if you're allowed to do that tonight, or if it has to go through, another gauntlet of council meetings. But I just want a level playing field. This is really hurting me to have delivery companies deliver in Colfax adult use. I went over how much I've lost. Went from 40,000 profit last year to minus 11. And a lot of it's because of that. So, Nick, is that allowed? Are we allowed to do that?
No, what you're asking would require an amendment to the ordinance to allow retail sale.
They would require a public hearing and.
I think we could bring up a public hearing though. We can talk about it during the good of the order.
I'm sorry, what?
I think we could bring it and do public hearing though, so we can talk about it during the good of the order.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it at the end of the meeting.
I feel pretty comfortable right now. I know this, just.
Because it's public comment, we're not supposed to be providing a whole lot of comment or work.
Public comment, but there is a part of the agenda where we can make decisions to bring things on future agendas. So
we'll talk
we can
about
address
that
it during
for
that
sure.
part of the agenda.
Anything we can do, you guys appreciate it.
Thank you. Tim?
Hello, my name's Tim. I'm going to kind of finish off what he was saying. Actually, the Colfax ordinance for commercial code is $500 up to $1 million in revenue. And I think anything over $1 million in revenue is like 0.17 cents on the dollar or something really low. So nobody in Colfax gets charged that much. I don't know why his income is different from anybody else's income, but it is discrimination. The other thing, the way Mr. Emanuel said that, or it was said that definitions in the state changed for the whole grading on the last on a particular subject. That's happened to us too. They've changed lots of definitions, and some of those definitions are like they come in like this, and this is what the city's done. They cross out stuff and then they add new stuff. It's been done so many times on our ordinance that there's like yellow and purple and green in the ordinance that's been crossed out, recrossed out, rewritten, crossed out again. And so that's, you know, you're allowed to do that, I believe, because it was the Groceries Act that gave you that permission to use your general law status as a, you know, chartered association or whatever you are. But lastly, but not least, because nothing I ever say here really matters, I would like to help this gentleman in the back row. Can he pay his bill with his receipts from the Recology? You know, just the thought, you know, he's paying to dump his trash. Can he pay the bill with his receipt? That would be like a really easy thing for him to probably agree with. And I don't know, just a suggestion, not that I should listen to, but that's my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody. Do we have anybody else for public comment? All right. If I let Tom come up, everybody else gets a second turn.
All right. I just got this during the meeting and I just wanted to share it with everybody. It's from CAL FIRE. It says Department firefighters from Station 30 in Colfax responded to an elderly resident who had fallen at her home. After rendering care to the resident, firefighters finished mowing her lawn. How cool is that?
All right. Do we have any other public comment? Because it's going to be kind of hard to go after that. Anything online?
We have a comment, but I believe it pertains to the closed session. Jane Gallagher is asking, what is the status of Snapdragon provisions?
Okay. So we can take that public comment at the end of the meeting before we go into closed session. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. We're going to move to council and staff reports. Let's go ahead and start with Sean.
My flood control district meeting that was scheduled was canceled. So
okay.
I have nothing to report tonight.
Tim?
Okay, news from Pioneer Energy, which started right here in Colfax. Our revenues are 227 million and our expenses are 207 million. So we're in the plus by about 20 million. So it's always nice when an agency's making money that started right here in Colfax. Pioneer Energy. Went to a Colfax downtown connectivity Main Street improvement. And if anybody missed that, you can scan it in or go to the website to give your opinion. And then there was also the Colfax Mission Career is looking to expand here in Colfax. And they had 2 days where they were meeting outside of the Main Street Pizza. And they want your opinion, so you can scan that in and give your opinion on that. And also I wanted to mention that I think Ingrid wanted to say that there's the garden tour coming up. I think that's what she's going to say. So that's Saturday, the garden tour.
Don't break your toys back there.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So as far as agency reports on my end, I think the most relevant one for update tonight is we did have a LAFCO meeting earlier today, and I have had several discussions with LAFCO staff that were triggered by item 3D on tonight's consent agenda, specifically the consolidation that we are approaching with the Shady Glen Sewer District. So that is a private sewer system. It is not a special district. And because of that, we do not qualify for an exception through the LAFCO process. We will need to go through LAFCO for an approval. With that being said, there are only two ways you can get an approval through LAFCO to do that type of a consolidation outside of your jurisdiction. One, if it is in forward progression towards a future expansion. So in other words, if we were pursuing annexation of Shady Glen, or it would have to be an emergency circumstance outside of our territory and sphere. So flat note, we don't qualify for the second opportunity. We would need to pursue the first the first reign opportunity in order to pursue that. So there will need to be a future discussion among council about what our plans are regarding Shady Glen, because if we do want to do this consolidation, we are going to need to make a commitment to LAFCO, including with the property owners of Shady Glen, that they are also willing to be on board with that commitment towards an annexation. So that's going to be a bit more of a conversation than probably what we were originally hoping, but that is the current landscape, and it's really my biggest thing to report from outside agencies tonight. As far as internal operations of the city, staff's obviously doing an amazing job as they always do. They're keeping me in the loop as appropriate. We are in a new situation versus where we were a couple weeks ago when we last went over everything. We did receive a resignation officially from David Ackerman earlier today, and it was effective immediately. So as a result of that, we are now in an interesting situation where 2 people constitutes a quorum, until which time we appoint another council member. Because of that, we later on the agenda tonight are going to have some discussions about our committees, because we will not be able to have 2-person committees for some time. That's going to put us in a difficult position in getting things done, because, I don't necessarily appreciate putting all decision-making power on a single person. So hopefully we can proceed forward with appointing council members as soon as possible. With that, I think that concludes my reports. Would any members of staff tonight, including you, Mick, like to make any kind of a report?
I have nothing to report.
Marguerite, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Okay. All right. No. Okay. Well, with that, we can go ahead and move directly into council business. We will start with item 9A, which is the draft short-term rental regulations. So Emmanuel, you are up again.
Hi, Mayor, members of the council. This next item is a request for direction from the council on preparation of a short-term rental ordinance. At the beginning of the year, council directed staff to initiate this process. We started by reaching out to the community, prepared a survey consisting of 9 questions, and we distributed that survey online. Received 65 responses, and then there's also online discussion on the city's Facebook page. Most of the responders to the survey support allowing a short-term rentals in Colfax. Approximately about 65% of those supported it. 54% supported allowing a mixture of hosted and non-hosted rentals. So a hosted rental is one where the property owner is in the home and is renting 1 or more rooms out of the house, versus a non-hosted where the guests have use of the entire house. Most of the concerns that were raised had to do with quality of life issues, such as noise, traffic, parking, that sort of thing. And so I crafted, the other thing I did is took a look at all of the cities and towns in Placer and Nevada County and the county's ordinances. Most of the jurisdictions whose ordinances I looked at do have standards to control the number of occupants. Some have limitations on the number of days that they can be rented out. They all have regulations on either prohibiting or restricting special events. 2 jurisdictions limit the total number of short-term rentals that are allowed. That's the Truckee and I believe it was Nevada County. And so what I did is prepared, if you look on pages 232 and 233 of the agenda packet, a set of recommended regulations that would apply to both hosted and non-hosted, and then a separate subsection of standards that would apply to hosted rentals and then to non-hosted rentals. So the regulations that would apply to both, there'd be a administrative permit, it'd be an annual permit. There'd be procedure for reviewing that permit. The quiet hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., Sunday through Thursday, 10 to 8 Friday and through Sunday. No outdoor amplified music. They'd be required to provide notice to adjoining property owners, no special events, annual fire department inspection. Those are kind of the highlights for the regulations that I suggest we included in ordinance that would apply to all short-term rentals. And then to hosted short-term rentals, I don't think there needs to be a limit on the number of those. Since they're in a home that is occupied, we think the residents of the homes would control any poor behavior or disruptive behavior. Suggesting 2 on-site parking spaces. So that would be for the residents plus 1 parking space per rented guest room, and allowing street parking fronting the property to be counted towards that parking requirement. I did receive a call from a rep with Airbnb who was wanted to discuss the ordinance and had some concerns. Their primary concern was this parking requirement. They felt that 1 per guest bedroom was too much, since they say in their experience many guests arrive. So if it's a family, they may have children with them in a separate room. The children aren't driving separately. There's also a limitation that we're suggesting, 2 guests per bedroom with a maximum of 6 guests. And then and this is different. I haven't seen this in other ordinances, but suggesting that on larger parcels, 20,000 square feet or larger, short-term rentals be allowed in a RV or other temporary structure, subject to provision of adequate sanitary facilities. And then with regard to non-hosted rentals, the survey response to that, some folks said we don't want any non-hosted. Some responses were 1 million. And there's like basically no limit. The median was, I believe it was 5. So that's what I'm suggesting. We start with that. If we receive more than 5, they'd be put on a wait list. We could come back in a year or 2 and revisit this and decide that it's appropriate to raise that number or not. Other requirements for the non-hosted is that a manager or owner be available to respond within 30 minutes to a complaint and have the complaint resolved within an hour. And that if they are cited, that the following year they would be required to be physically present within an hour. And then no wood burning fire pits, bonfires, campfires. And so that's a summary of the ordinance recommendations that I came up with. And so the next step in the process would be to receive input from the public and the council. And with that, and then with council direction, we could go back and draft an ordinance for introduction at a subsequent meeting.
Thank you, Emmanuel. With that, I'll start it off with council questions and discussion. If you don't mind, I have just some comments. Not to discredit the hard work you put into this. I do very much appreciate it. I do also feel that after having read it, I felt like it was very heavily restrictive, far beyond what's really necessary for our town. I'd like to hold a public workshop and have a discussion and go through it. But I'd also like to ask the individual council members, I know you guys are swimming in free time right now. But if you don't mind taking some time to redline the ordinance with your thoughts and comments to bring to a workshop, I'd like to make sure we come in with a very guided discussion of where we stand so we can kind of knock those things out, because when we do have the public coming to that meeting, I know people are going to come prepared with their comments and opinions. So I'd like to be able to basically go down through the ordinance together, address people's thoughts, concerns, and feelings, and find some compromise there, because I think that it's still very malleable at this point. Pass it to you guys.
I agree. I think we should do a public workshop and hammer out a little bit more of this. I think you did a great job in bringing all these different ordinances together. So I'd really like to be able to cherry pick what we think is going to work best for the city.
Yeah, it's given us a very organized baseline to work off of. So we're not just coming in with unorganized thoughts. So I really appreciate it.
Definitely. I know we have several short-term rentals operating in the city currently, so it'd be great to move this forward. But I do think a public workshop would be beneficial.
Right. We're gonna do it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I'd like to find out what other smaller communities, what kind of ordinance do they have? How's that compared to ours? It's possible to get that information.
Okay, yeah, and I did survey all of the towns and cities in Placer and Nevada County. And if you go to the last attachment to the staff report, I have a summary of their ordinances. Loomis does not have a short-term rental ordinance. When I spoke to the planner there, they said they're starting to work on one. I don't know how far into the process they were, but that was
Shortly after.
And also it looks like Lincoln does not regulate them. All of the other jurisdictions have a short-term rental ordinance with varying degrees of regulation. And yes, by all means, this is a suggested menu of visions that could be included in an ordinance. And I don't think there's any right answer, but
no, this is definitely a really great baseline for us to work off of, because at least now we have something that we can redline, put comments on, elaborate on, and have a basis for that discussion, because this is one of those items that I think evokes a lot of emotions out of people. You wouldn't think it does, but it really does, because you have one group of people who are very concerned about overall housing need, who are concerned that this will diminish our ability to provide rentals for a community that is 80 to 90% rental citizens. And then you do have a lot of other people who are very concerned about property rights. So, you know, at least now we've got something that we can all talk about. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think the policy direction for tonight is let's schedule a workshop.
Agreed.
Thank you. All right, with that, we can move to item 9B. This is titled Appointment of City of Colfax Council Member. Really, this is an opportunity for us to discuss that process, update where we are, what needs to happen from here, and how we navigate what's going on now that we are down to a council of 3 versus a council of 4. So, Nick, maybe you could talk for a moment on where we are now.
Where we are now is you have 2 vacancies on the city council. You have 60 days from the effective date of each vacancy to appoint, which means for the Mendoza vacancy, you must do an appointment no later than July 4th of this year. For the Ackerman vacancy, it is August 13th. Those that drop dead dates. If you don't have appointments in place by the required times, you must call a special election. In either case, you have the right to call a special election. If the council, for whatever reason, doesn't want to do an appointment, you can call a special election. That gets a little pricey, especially if you're the only issue on the ballot. I don't know what the cost is. I know it's not cheap. The process at this point is very interesting. It's in the council's discretion. I think you last made a provision for applications to be submitted by May 26th. You know, with the Ackerman resignation, it may make sense to push that out as far as you can and perhaps fill both at once. You can do that if you'd like. You can do one at a time. It's up to you. We do have the applications that have been submitted. There was a notice that went out. That's going to have, if you want that notice to be valid, you need to ratify that tonight and decide when the drop dead date is going to be for the receipt of applications. Once that occurs, and this is where it gets really interesting, you would normally have a committee interview the applicants. Guess what? You got 3 council members. A quorum is 2. You can't have a committee that constitutes a quorum of the council. So you're going to have to discuss and decide how you're going to conduct the interviews. What we've done in the past, one other time, was the whole council did interviews. We had people show up at the meetings and They had submitted their applications in advance. Council was aware of who had applied, you know, what their positions were, and they just asked questions at the meeting and then made their decision. I think that's probably where this is going to, you know, to go. But whatever it is, you have to do a fair process. Everybody has to have the same opportunity to submit their application. Everybody's entitled to due consideration by the council, and then council does what it does. These are, by the way, the last appointments you can make for this council. You cannot have a majority of the council appointed. So if somebody else decides they want to resign, we'll have to have a special election.
Y'all aren't allowed to.
So I'm happy to answer questions, but I think that answers where we are at this point.
All right. Well, with that, let's discuss. Yeah, we can take public comment first. Anyone want to make a public comment before we get into the discussion?
Hi, Tim Ryan. So Mick, you went through that so fast, I could not keep track. Okay, so for the applications, what is the date to be done with that?
It is not established.
It's not established.
Correct. Initially, it was May 26th. It was May 26th. A notice was posted, I think yesterday or the day before, that extended that deadline. The council tonight is going to establish the final deadline for the applications for the Mendoza vacancy and I assume for the Ackerman vacancy as well.
So it is possible to have two council members voted on by city council right now to come on board at one time?
Not tonight.
Not tonight. No, I'm not saying tonight.
Yes, the council,
Yes.
the council can appoint two at the same time.
And so how many applicants do you guys have?
6? Yeah, 6 at this point.
And so is there? I don't know who the applicants are. I don't know if that is a public knowledge thing that has been posted or you can let that information out. But with that being said, does the public, can we talk to the remaining council members and put in a request or a referral for these members?
Tonight's a great opportunity.
You have a First Amendment right to lobby your council for anything you want. So yes.
Well, unfortunately, right now, I'm not sure that everybody knows who's running for this thing.
And that is public.
It is public?
Yeah, that is public.
Okay.
So those names can be released.
So if there's somebody you want to lobby for, you're welcome to do it because anybody can find out.
Okay. And is that by public comment or writing or?
Right now, if you want to give us a recommendation, we'll accept a recommendation. Somebody in mind you were trying to protect their privacy. So I apologize.
The only one I do know is Suzanne Roberts. And I think she's an excellent candidate. She's been, and she's also been a council member. And she was looking to come on with the Chamber of Commerce. I think she has a lot of enthusiasm. I think she would be at your meetings and actually do more work than obviously past council members and would take the time. So other than that, she's the only one that I know of. So I'll put my 2 cents in with that. And the other thing that I'm wondering about, just real quick, are the council members getting, lack of a better word, reimbursed enough for the job that they are doing? Or is it possible, and maybe this is why we might not be getting a lot of good candidates coming in, but is it possible to improve the stipend?
Tim, I'm going to tell you right now, if someone doesn't have an altruistic spirit, they're not going to survive in this position.
And what do you mean by that?
The stipends that this city can afford, especially if we compare to our larger, sister and brother cities within the county of Placer.
Yeah.
If we were to compare where our stipend is per population to their stipends per population, we in no way, shape, or form would be able to make a meaningful difference by increasing the stipend, in my opinion.
It might be enough to encourage more people to apply and good possibly qualify people to apply. I'm just thinking as the future goes, and this is with our city also, that we need to start bumping things up and really working on towards the future.
You know, there's a statutory limit though. A city of this size can only pay its council members so much. I think the maximum is $500 a month. It might be less than that.
So we're not at that.
And you're not at that, no.
No, we're
$100 a month.
right.
So if you equivalent that to the time and resources and energy that needs to go into doing the job correctly and showing up to board meetings and all other responsibilities that come with it, I mean, you're lucky if you're not coming up in the negative. And I
I'm
don't
surprised that you're not. I'm surprised the council members are not paying the city to be on this thing.
fairly certain everybody who's sitting here today comes up negative.
Yeah, no.
But
You can't even put it towards hours and if you went salary or something like that. I'm just saying, maybe this is something, a possibility, sorry, to look forward in the future. And I understand Loomis, they only have one council meeting per month. I'm just wondering if there's options that could be looked into in the future that would encourage more of our city members to jump in on this. Hey, thanks.
I appreciate that, Tim.
all that you guys do, believe me.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
I'd just like to say, I would hope everybody who's trying to get themselves elected or anything is doing it as a public service and not looking to increase their income. That's not really what the job's about. So, I don't know.
I agree. I think, in my opinion, we've had a couple discussions about this over the last couple of years, and I've maybe sometimes been a bit harsh, and I've been very adamant that the stipend that council receives is intended to cover costs associated with you doing your job. Whether that is making sure that you have a cell phone available to respond to constituents, whether that's making sure you pay for a laptop so that you can read your emails and provide comments on documents. That's my understanding of what I believe that the stipend is for, is to make sure that you have the tools to do your job, and really nothing more than that. Others have other opinions, there's a lot of other interpretations, but I would be very reserved I'm speaking as a voter at the moment, not as a council member. I would be reserved to cast a vote for somebody who wasn't willing to put it in as a public service, solely as a public service. That would be a huge red flag for me.
You probably should, the other question was who's applied and.
Marguerite, do you mind reading the names of those who have applied for council so far?
Yes, just give me one moment, please.
Well, she's looking, and I didn't mean to apply that somebody's coming in for this as a business, but I'm thinking that there are retired people in this community that could use an extra $200 or $300 per month that you might be able to draw in. I totally understand what you're saying, but it's just an option.
No, that's definitely fair. I can understand it, and like I said, I'm probably just being a bit stiff. Go ahead, Tom.
Tom Parham again. When I was on the council, and this was 10 years ago, I served for 4 years, and I think we appointed 3 people. Right after the election, Josh Alpine left because he won his election for the water board, and we had to appoint somebody right then. And, we just got sworn in and we didn't know, what to do. So we had a meeting a week later, had applicants, they came up, they talked, and we nominated somebody. And that's when Jim was, and Tony interviewed everybody and they picked somebody. Then the next one was resignation. And
Ken Delfino.
Yeah, and we just had an election 9 months prior, and we just picked the next guy with the next amount of votes, and that was that. And did we do another one, Kim? I think
Bernie.
Yeah.
Use the
No,
floor.
that was after I'd left.
Oh, okay.
It seems like we've got a deadline for Marnie's replacement. We've got to get somebody on here quick.
Yes.
And because David's was submitted today, we've got 2 months now, right? And the city did something really smart after Marnie, I think. We said, let's make it 2 months instead of 1 month, so we don't have to panic. So I would suggest that you pick somebody from Marnie's spot and then, continue getting applications and fill David's as soon as possible. But I don't think you need to point to right away. And I think Larry Hilberg would be a great addition to the city council. He's smart, he cares, he's easy to get along with. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have any more public comment on the item? I know Marguerite's about to read all the names so that we have it on the public record. Put it up on the screen. She would have to have created a slide ahead of time, so.
I have them, Marguerite, because I do if you don't.
Okay, Nick will go ahead and read them.
Just a second, I'll have to get back to them. Okay. The candidates I'm aware of: Andy Cave, Suzanne Roberts, Nicole Maldonado, Larry Hilberg, Traveris Butler, and Dakota Hoke. Huh? Okay. Andy Cave, Suzanne Roberts, Nicole Maldonado, Larry Hilberg. Is it Traveris Butler and Dakota Hoke. Those are the ones I'm aware of.
Nicole's last name is Maldonado.
Maldonado.
All right, let's discuss. I think we hold a special meeting next week and we conduct interviews.
Yeah, for the extension, did you want to do till Monday? Or how long was that extension put in that we wanted?
It was just put in until Friday. I felt like that was enough to give people just a couple more last minute days to.
Since we have the second council member leave tonight, do you want to go till Monday? Put the notice out, that gives almost a week. Or do we need to go to Wednesday and give a full week?
You know what, because both council members resigned in such close succession, I think it would be appropriate to keep the same applicant pool. So that way because we have a lot of really good candidates and I don't want to rule anybody out for inadequate reasons. So we can go ahead and conduct interviews next week. And why don't we just take applications right up until the day of the interviews?
That works.
So let's figure out a day next week that we can have a special meeting and do interviews. Yeah, if you want to come up, I didn't close public comment, so we can take one. Obviously, I'm running a very lax meeting tonight, as you can see.
Hi, Jim Young again. I was just wondering if we're going to be able to have like a town hall or a public meeting where we can meet the candidates and ask them questions.
So what we're looking to schedule right now would be public interviews. So my understanding is we would be able to take public comment on the item. So what I would suggest is if there are questions you would specifically like us to ask the candidates, we need to ask all the candidates the same questions, just to be clear. If there are questions you'd like us to specifically consider asking the candidates, if you could send them ahead of time, that would be the best way for us to make sure that it's on our pre-written set of questions. But yes, everybody in the public will be welcome to come and witness those interviews, since we don't have the ability to perform them privately at this point. So I hope everyone's doesn't have too much stage fright.
I remember in the past, we had an opportunity to come and meet candidates and ask our questions. It was at the community center. And I don't know if the council needs to.
We can ask people to congregate ahead of time.
We can, but I think it would be more appropriate to be able to ask a question, not public comment. It's not public question time. So it might be better to be able to go one-on-one with.
So I do understand,
For that, could we open the meeting like a half an hour earlier or something and allow just the general meeting congregation? And that way, before we start the meeting, you have to get official, people have a chance to meet their candidates.
That sounds like a good idea.
yeah. Because and let me be clear, the only reason that I'm not dying to throw this at a special election is because of how much it could potentially cost the city.
Yeah.
Because I fundamentally believe the voters should be making this choice, and this makes me extremely uncomfortable that we're in this situation today. But it would be just detrimentally expensive from my understanding to send this to a special election, and we need to be able to keep the council functioning. We don't have time to wait for that to progress at this point due to our critical manpower here. So with that being said, yeah, how does Wednesday look?
4 council meetings in a month. Is that a record?
It might be a record. The 21st.
We'll take July off.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I'm checking my schedule as well. We're crunched for time. I would love to ask the applicants if they can all make it happen on the 21st. But I know that that's not realistic
You also
necessarily.
have a regular meeting already scheduled for the 28th. You can just add that as an agenda item on, and make it a limited agenda meeting.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Thanks, Mick.
Good idea.
Trinity over here overcomplicating things as usual.
Well, it also gives us time to post notice for David's vacancy, because we do need to post a notice of the
Yeah.
vacancy and, you know, that we're going to accept applications, so that.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll.
And then we just leave the application period open on the day of.
We're gonna leave it open until the 28th, the day of. You have to have it in by noon.
Yeah, there you go, perfect.
Okay.
That way we have time to make sure we schedule appropriately.
Yep.
So in the meantime, we aren't gonna be able to have a committee. So would you guys be okay with me working with Mick to make sure that we create the list of questions ahead of time? And then if you guys want to add anything, or if there's anything specific you think of, maybe you email it over to Mick.
Yeah, you can help them get a draft together and then they can send it out to us and we'll provide our comments.
Yeah.
Or
Can do.
So we'll essentially all provide our questions to Mick. Mick, you compile it into a script and then we'll have it ready for the meeting.
Yeah, I also have questions you asked the last couple of times, so maybe you can start with those.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sounds good.
Okay, any housekeeping items on that we've missed?
No, but Mike gets to be at his first meeting when we do the appointment.
Hey,
Perfect.
perfect. Yes, that is an important clarification. If you're not a registered voter living within the city limits, and I mean living within the city limits, you will not be qualified, and we are going to ask you about that publicly. So just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, because I did get a couple phone calls from folks asking, well, if I have a house in the city limits, but I don't technically live there, does that count? The answer is no.
No.
You have to be registered to vote there. I didn't know I had a timer.
Yeah, you're timed out.
Seems appropriate at this point. All right, well, I think we've got it for that item. I think we can close out 9B at this point. I'll just close with one comment that let's make sure on that agenda, we also have at the very end of the agenda, after we swear people in, I want to do the committee assignments. I want to have that discussion because that's critical juncture at this point. All right, we can go ahead and move. I think we provided our direction. We don't need any kind of a motion. So we'll go ahead and move to go to the order. Sean, you had items?
Yep. So this Friday, June 16th, starting at 4 p.m., the Colfax Art Walk and Car Cruise Night is going to be happening. Great event downtown, lots of good artists and lots of awesome cars out there. So I just want to make sure everybody knew that since Foxy's not here tonight. And I wanted to address Jim's question. We're having so many problems with delivery services and all the other issues that come along with that not being able to have any sort of control over who's delivering into the city or even having any competition for those in the city. I think it's probably prudent with all the changes that have happened and all the stuff that's going on, to talk about everybody's favorite subject besides the sewer plant and bring this back onto an agenda sooner rather than later, so that we can get a plan together and discuss whether or not we want to allow our medical marijuana shop to do adult delivery service.
I'm supportive of agendizing the conversation because I'll be honest, there are very specific things within the ordinance I want to open up and I want to make changes to. So I'm supportive of that. I would just say that my intent when we had the last conversation was that we would be closing that item for the sitting council, because we had made a determination among the sitting council at that time that, you know, we did not have adequate support to open the ordinance for changes.
Maybe we could do it.
We're in a new climate now. We just lost half our council. So with that being said, I would feel it would be appropriate to give the new sitting members an opportunity to participate in that discussion.
Absolutely.
So I would say maybe let's put it a month after appointment to make sure they have an opportunity to become very acquainted.
So the last meeting in July.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because it's a lot. It is a lot of material and I want to give them an opportunity to get acquainted with it before we have a discussion publicly.
Makes sense. Cool. That's all I have.
Real quick, are you supportive of agendizing that item?
Sure, as long as, there's more than three of us.
Yeah, it has to be a sitting council, and that does not, I want to be really clear, us agendizing that item, my understanding of what we are saying here tonight and what we're directing staff to do is to bring back that item at the end of July, an open ordinance, open to modification that night. That is my expectation. So I just want to make sure we have no lack of clarity here. Is that the understanding of council?
That's fine, but also tailoring the discussion specifically to allowing delivery service also.
I just want to make sure, because last time we had this and it came up,
some confusion.
It was really confusing, and I came out of that thinking we were going to open it up and we were going to fix some things, and then we never even opened it. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page when we leave here tonight. Everybody knows what's going to happen. So my understanding is that we're going to open the ordinance for discussion, and yes, there are some focus points that we are going to focus on.
That's a good word.
But we are not going to exclude discussing items within that ordinance and the scope of that ordinance that we may want to modify that night.
Do you want to see then a draft of what the ordinance would look like if you were going to allow adult use?
Adult use delivery. Adult use delivery.
Not storefront.
Not storefront. I guess it could be included. If you're looking for storefront, then I guess you could add that in there, but we already.
Well, I want to openly have a discussion, come to a place of, because we're never going to have agreement. I want to be very clear on that. It's never going to happen. I want to come to a point where we've at least had a discussion and decided on some form of a concession, and go from there. I don't necessarily feel that I need to see a draft that night, personally.
Okay.
I just want the ordinance to be open so that we can come out of that meeting saying, here's what we'd like to see changed. And then the following meeting come forward with that draft ready for adoption.
That sounds good. Okay.
Okay.
I ask, was that change including getting the ordinance all together on it?
Yeah, any change. I'm opening it to any change. Because again, we have 2 vacant council positions here. And I don't want to presume to know what their position on the matter is. I don't even want to ask during the interview process, because I want to be very clear that when we're interviewing potential council members, we're not going to be picking people based on what suits our policy direction. So I just want to make sure that I'm setting that expectation for council members. We can ask people if they have direct conflicts of interest, but I don't want to ask people what their policy directions are. So yes, anything and everything that anybody desires, that will be the time to ask for it. That will be the time to have that discussion. And I would ask that everybody please engage respectfully. All right. Anything else for good of the order?
Can Go ahead. I have not good at the order, but good at the outgoing. I wanted to say something good about our, good, he can't hear me. I can talk about him now. I've worked with and for 5 city managers. And if we were interviewing, like we're going to be interviewing city councilmen, of the 5 that I worked for, the one that I would pick is sitting there in the front row. So, which one? Former city manager. So.
Well, we can't pick him again. He just left.
I said, yeah. Everything else. That's all. Thank you.
Do you have anything else for good of the order?
That's all.
Okay. I did have one item for good of the order I wanted to bring up tonight. So, Tom, I love that you came up here and you pointed out how many council members have needed to be appointed over such a short period of time. And to some folks, that might not seem like a short period of time, but when you're a member of staff trying to navigate different personalities and having multiple different bosses, which I'm going to say, first of all, Wes did a fantastic job of navigating over the years. That's quite a lot of turnover. That's quite a lot of instability. And this is not the first time we've lost a city manager during a period of losing council members and appointing people and ending up in a short-staffed council. What I'm concerned about is the fact that I never, when I decided that I wanted to run for council or when I accepted a nomination to be the mayor, I never imagined a situation where the mayor would be making unilateral decisions or overseeing staff in the capacity that we currently have going on today. And frankly, that's kind of foolish on my part because having looked at our history, it definitely the writing was on the wall that this was a possibility, especially in a small town with a limited budget and a limited ability to participate in that market for great, staff people, great council members. It is very difficult to retain people. With all that being said, with my discomfort, I'm not saying that I'm unwilling to step into this role or this position or do the capacity that's being asked of me at the moment. But what I am saying is, I don't think one person should carry this much responsibility or this much control without the direct consent of the voters for that person to do so. And I'd like to pose the question to council. Should we be posing the question to the voters if they want to elect their mayor going forward? Because in a small town of this size, this is a situation that may happen multiple times over the next several years. And while I appreciate that the council appointed me to this position, the voters may have a different opinion of who they want to do this job. And I think they should be given that opportunity, and I would like to know council's thoughts on that.
That's something for a future agenda.
Yeah. So essentially what I'm asking is if we want to agendize the discussion as to whether or not we want to pose the question to the voters, because it's not a question for council. It's a question that would have to go to the voters and the voters would have to decide if that's something they want. I know. Any thoughts?
We can put it on an agenda and take a look and talk about maybe for the next election cycle, seeing if we want.
Yeah.
Pose that question.
So the question is whether we decide here or
We don't
whether
decide.
the voters decide.
Well, the voters decide, but the question is essentially, can we agendize the consideration to pose the question to the voters?
Yeah.
So I don't want to put that on the next agenda because it's already going to be very full.
Maybe we could hit the August meeting.
Yeah. So not a guarantee that it would go on the ballot, but it's just something I think that we should have an open conversation about. And Tom, that would be a great opportunity for you to provide some contextual background to you, because I know you'll have some comments. I'm sure a lot of other folks will as well. I know it's going to be a heated subject, but With that, does anybody have anything for the good of the order? I'm going to open it to the public as well. Anything, any last thoughts anyone wants to make sure we captured? All right, Mr. Treasurer and Mr. Former City Manager, I'll take yours.
Great. I just wanted to thank council for the opportunity to serve you in this community for the time that I was here. It was a privilege and honor. And I text every one of you tonight, my cell phone number. Please use it when you need it. I'm still available to you at any time you need. Thank you.
Thanks, Wes. I think that was a mistake, setting your cell phone number out.
I was going to say, do you miss us? Or is this you coming back?
I'm just kidding. Not quite.
Thanks again.
Yeah, once again, Wes, thank you so much for what you did for this city. And yeah, good luck to Loomis. So Trinity, I just want to say that you have done an excellent job as our mayor over these past few years, and the different situations that have come up. You've worked with everybody. You're very, like what Wes was, transparent, and you have definitely your deep feelings, and you express those very well. And I hope to see that continue on with your new council members that come up. But just so you're aware, and I do believe the city owes you a great deal of what you've done. And just a quick comment, I think that the way you guys have done this before, Tom will probably say different, but I think the way you go through the council members and the learning and the ability of what each member does, then transitions up to be mayor pro tem and then mayor. There's a lot of good experience that you learn from that. So just my quick, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Any other last comments? All right, with this, I'm going to go ahead and
Don't adjourn.
no, I was going to say, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the open session, and we're going to go ahead and reconvene in closed session at this time. So this is the opportunity on the agenda for anybody who'd like to make a public comment related to the closed session item tonight.
But before you take that, we have to formally add the Snapdragon issue to closed session. You just have to ratify that.
Oh,
So that
okay.
just takes a motion and a vote.
All right. Do I have a motion to ratify that?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So with that, public comment on the closed session item. Do we have any public comment on this item? I know that we did receive a question online. Was there any follow-up to that?
No, just the one question from Jane Gallagher, who asked, what is the status of Snapdragon provisions?
Okay. So the item tonight is conference with legal counsel existing pursuant to government code section 54956.9 D1. People of the state of California, this is our attorneys, city of Colfax, versus Snapdragon provisions at all, Placer County Superior Court. That is the item before us tonight. So if we have no public comment at this time, then we will go ahead and proceed into closed session, and we will vacate the room. Thank you. Yeah.